Hi folks, welcome to another episode of My Life with Robert Burns. Jim Thompson and Douglas Mackenzie here again to talk to another of our cronies from around the Burns world. How are you doing, Jim?
Doing great, Douglas. Lovely wet evening in Kilmarnock, but
It's been nice weather for a while, but it's really deteriorated today. So, folks, tonight our guest is currently for the second time the president of Dumfries #1 Ladies Burns Club, but for 35 years she was secretary of that Burns Club, and she's been president of all sorts of other organisations as well. So cronies everywhere, please welcome Betty Haining. Hi, Betty.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Good. Yes.
So, Betty, we always start this thing by asking people to tell us a little bit about themselves. So, can you just tell us something about yourself?
Well, I was actually born in Dumfries, but that was just by chance because my mother was visiting her sister because I grew up in the country. Grew up just up the road from Ellisland.
All right.
Went to primary school the other side of Ellisland, Burnhead Primary School, and we got poetry, more than Burns, but we especially got Burns poetry at school. And as a child, I loved words, lots of poetry, and also the words of the hymns.
Right.
So I liked Burns from a very early age. I didn't know anything about Burns clubs of that day. Fast forward to 1956. My mother was in hospital, and next bed to her was Mrs. Nettie Henderson, and they became friends for the rest of their life. And I didn't know it then, but Nettie Henderson was a founder member of the Dumfries Ladies Burns Club #1.
Oh, very good. You fast forwarded there. Can I get you to reverse back a wee bit?
Right.
And maybe tell us a bit about what your school days were like. Where did you go to secondary school?
Dumfries Academy.
Right.
And tended going on, but unfortunately when I was in 4th year my mother was ill and I had to leave school, which I was very sad about at the time, but I've no regrets. And eventually had a job in accounts.
All right.
That job in accounts, and I've always been interested in money and accounts.
And what company was that with?
William Maxwell's the wholesalers in Dumfries.
All right.
And he had a firm in McQuakers and Maybole and Flemings and Hoyt, and I did their books and their stock takings, and also a firm in Dumfries College Stores. So I did all their accounts and books.
I would imagine that was quite detailed work in these days. It would be but big ledgers with pound, shillings, and pence, and having to add up all sorts of columns.
Kalamazoo account system, and no ad machines or anything like that, but that suited me perfectly.
Aye.
Invoicing and adding and everything. Loved it. Then I got married young and went to live at Glencapel. In those days my husband didn't think that when you were married you should work, and I happily agreed and went to live at Glencapel. Right. Which is about 5 miles from Dumfries. And as I said before, 1956, fast forward to 1966, and I was still at Glencapel with 3 young children, and Nettie asked my sister and I to the Dumfries Ladies Burns Club #1's Close and Social down the road, and I went and thoroughly enjoyed it. Good. Then the following year she asked my sister and I back, and she said, how about joining the Burns Club? Well, I couldn't, because it wasn't convenient. 1969, we moved up to the Kingham Quay. Which
I'm going to get you to slow down a wee bit, because we've got a lot of years to cover, and we could maybe go back and tell us a little bit more about the accounting thing, because I'm fascinated, because one of my first jobs when I started work was in adding up all sorts of stuff and doing calculations and such like, and I got what was the first electronic adding machine in Johnny Walker's in Kilmarnock. That's where I was working. And I always remember I was quite fascinated because it was called Anita, ANITA. And that stood for A New Inspiration to Arithmetic.
Well, the one price that I can remember, there's all different prices because chocolate boxes, say Cadbury's chocolate boxes, had 4 dozen bars at 6p a bar, right?
Uh-huh.
And the cost that we charged out to the shop was £1.04.
Aye.
Work out the profit from that. It's the only price I can remember. But I had all these prices, and I must say I was quite quick at remembering them. I didn't need to look at the tables. And sweetie jars, you know, £6 at whatever price a quarter. Crisp
Uh-huh.
biscuits was loose biscuits, not packet biscuits. Cigarettes, groceries, loads of different prices, and we covered Dumfries and Galloway in the north of England.
My goodness. And was it mainly, it was confectionery and cigarettes
So
and all that kind of stuff?
Wholesalers, confectioners, cigarettes, groceries,
Uh-huh.
and the same with the branch in Hoyt covered the borders, and Maybole did that area. So there was all these areas to cover. But it was great.
So what age would you be then? Was that sort of 16, 17?
15.
15, right?
I left school at 15. Well, I was a wee bit over 15 because I say my intentions were to go on. And
Uh-huh.
it transpired, my mother wasn't as, it was thought when she first took ill that it was going to be bad. So it turned out, luckily, that it wasn't as bad as what we first thought, because I was the eldest of 8, you see.
Uh-huh.
So there were 7 below me at that age.
Wow.
So as I say, I had to leave school, but I've not got any regrets.
So you wouldn't have much kind of what we would now call leisure time. It would be a case of finishing your work and going home to help in the house.
Yeah, but I wasn't interested in going out. I knitted and sewed and read.
Uh-huh.
Went dancing on a Saturday night.
All right. Where was the dancing at?
At the assembly rooms in Dumfries.
Aye.
There was another place called the Drill Hall, and the Teddy Boys were there.
Aye.
You could get a pass out to the assembly rooms. We did that one night just to see what it was like with the Teddy Boys. And I've nothing against Teddy Boys, but I wasn't a fan of Teddy Boys.
Aye. So what kind of dance would it be? Was that kind of jiving and was it rock and roll at that stage?
No, we didn't do that at the assembly rooms. No. St Bernard's Walk, Quick Step and things like that.
All right, okay. I remember learning these at school.
Yes, it was that kind of dance, and it was, yes, it was good. There's another bit in the town, the jungle, but I never was at it. to know what it was. These were the 3 places at the time. But even when I was married, my husband loved dancing. He'd be first up on the floor.
Uh-huh.
And every Saturday night.
Fantastic.
The children grew up a bit, so dancing was always a big part of my life.
And you still enjoy dancing?
No.
No,
I don't dance now. I've no danced for about 5 or 6 years. Sometimes I have balance problems, so dancing is out.
Uh-huh.
But I enjoyed it. Good bands.
Aye. Dancing's out for me as well, but it's mainly because I can't dance.
Oh. No, we had some good bands. We went to Algarth and the East of the Wick dance band. No, there were some good bands that came to dances here.
Can you remember any of the names?
Jackie Bonner,
Uh-huh.
the Wick Country Dance Band. God, I'm trying to think. Yeah. I'm trying to think. I can't remember them. Loads of them. I've even seen Jimmy Shand.
Oh, wow.
In fact, that was at a Burns function at the West Town Burns Supper in Glasgow.
Uh-huh.
We heard Jimmy Shand and his band.
Aye.
So that was something.
Aye. Tremendous.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about your family. Did you say you 3 kids?
A son and 2 daughters.
Uh-huh.
And they all live near at hand. And my son has got 2 sons. My elder daughter sadly was widowed 5 years ago, and she's got a daughter and a son. And my younger daughter has got a daughter and son. And I've got 7 great-grandchildren.
Oh, wow.
So, and they all live near at hand. And Sunday, generally, is church and family day.
Uh-huh.
There are exceptions, but that's a general thing, church and family day. And it's St Michael's Church that I go to, which, you know.
And you've been going to the same church all these years?
No, I joined Hollywood Church. Not Hollywood in America. Hollywood, HO with 1 L. That's along the road from Ellisland.
Right.
I was married in Hollywood Church, and then, as I say, when I got married, I went to Glencapel. So it was Capel Carlaverat Church when I was down at Glencapel. But when I moved up to Kingham, St Michael's was the nearest, and it was very appropriate, wasn't it, being a Burns church?
Oh, right. Aye, ideal. Yeah.
It's got a lot of other connections too. It's the Covenanters, the Norwegian, lots of connections in St Michael's.
And when you were living out in the country, I mean, how was life living in the country in these days?
Well, very busy, because my mother had the place we lived at was called the Toll Bar, Toll Bar. And central. I don't want to sound bragging, but it's the central point for Hollywood, Burnhead, and Olga. We had a wee shop.
Right.
A wee shop. Now, it wasn't a shop where he come in and there was a counter. He knocked on the door and asked for what he wanted.
Right.
And we sold lemonade, crisps, biscuits, sweeties, cigarettes. I saved, well, we used to call them fag packets when I was a wee lassie. Fag packets. And it was also a central place for nap and domino schools. So, and Sunday was the busiest day of our life because we had Sunday papers. We weren't allowed a long line. I think that's how I get up early now, because everything in the house and everything had to be done for the Sunday papers coming.
Right.
And everybody from round about came for the Sunday papers. So it was quite a busy little place. It had a sign at the top of the garden, "Get your prayers, please, here."
Right. I remember that because my grandfather used to be a hairdresser and had a wee tobacconist counter in the place. I can remember all the signs, and I was allowed to serve cigarettes even as a kid in these days.
Oh. And in the spring, pies and peas out in the garden.
Say that again.
In the spring, there was pies and peas. It wasn't a cafe or anything. You just sat outside and had pies and peas.
That would suit me. I like my pies and peas.
We were I grew up with a very, lots of folk round about. Because the congregation, if a lot of folk congregated there for a blether and the news.
Yeah. And if you date siblings, I mean, that must have been great having a big family around about you all the time.
Well, I didn't think so at the time.
Did you not?
Some of the times, because I'd got to, if the baby was kind of crying at that, well, I got the job of looking after it.
All right.
No, I was pleased to have them all, but sometimes when you're a child, you don't want to be helping at home.
You don't want the responsibility.
No. But when I was 11, my dad got a job down in Somerset.
Right.
And the boss decided he was going to build a new bungalow at the top of Portrack and go to Somerset, which I was only 11, but I was glad. We moved up to bungalow. We had electric light.
Oh, wow.
Room, because at the Toll Bar, we'd walk up the garden path to go to the loo. So you can just imagine what it was like in the winter.
Up
the garden path, and we had hens, and we had a pear tree in the garden, and my dad had a ferret. And we always had a dog and cat. So yes, and cobbles, a white step at the door, only one door into the house, and it was stuckied, washed and stuckied every day.
Wow.
Stuckied, kept the witches away.
Hey, you must have some stories about these days. That's fantastic.
Well, I do, and funnily enough, there was a lot of folk that were very considerate, I would say, towards the family. Sound bragging, but my mother had 8 children. We're always well fed and clean. I wouldn't have think much money, but we're well fed and clean. But we got milk from the farm, and we had a lot of rabbits, which didn't cost anything. And my mother baked and made her own jam, and lots of things and doors could be left open. Folk had nothing to pinch, and there was 2 tramps in the area. I remember them with their tin cans to make their tea in.
Right.
Plus Cumnock, there was folk come down from Cumnock to the bramble picking.
Oh, wow.
McKechnie's.
We know the McKechnie's.
Yes. Well, many years later, there was a bus come down to Friar Scarce. I was much older. It was in my Burns time. And there was McCarthy's in it, and they got in touch. We met up at Friar Scarce.
Uh-huh.
But I've lost touch with them all. Because my Uncle Tom came from Cumnock. My Aunt Lizzie married Tom Pat from Cumnock. And through that, we got to know quite a number of folk from Cumnock. And as I say, there was a good number of them come down from bramble picking. So I don't know, there couldn't have been many brambles up near Cumnock.
Aye. Well, Alec McKechnie used to be the treasurer of New Cumnock Burns Club.
Oh.
And Alec also ran the local garage and had a bus. And we used his bus all the time for our Burns Club trips.
Well, it was a McKechnie bus that came down to Friar Scarce.
Aye, well, that would be Alec that would be driving.
Right.
So, and there was the McKechnie's newsagents in Cumnock when I was a boy as well. So,
well, I think they were all connected to the it'd be the older generation that come down to the bramble picking.
Would be. So you mentioned the church. You've been involved in the church most of your life. Have you had any kind of positions in the church?
Yes, I'm an elder. I've been an elder for St Michael's for about, I think it's about 30 years.
Wow.
Quite honoured to be that. The Reverend Albert Elder was a very popular minister there, and it was him that asked me to be an elder, yes. Yes. I've always been church minded.
And do you sing in the choir?
No, that's one thing I can't do. I can't sing.
Hey, Jim Thompson can't sing either, but it never stops him.
I'm a member of the guild, and I've been a convener of the guild. And while I was convener, there was a songs of praise in the church. In fact, there's been 2 songs of praise in the church, and at both of them I was asked to speak. One I spoke in the Russell Cross, and the other I spoke in that lovely hymn, Just As I Am. I was quite honoured to do that. That was when Maurice Bond was the minister, Reverend Maurice Bond was the minister. And the guild is obviously, it's not getting the same members as it used to do. We meet in the afternoon now instead of at night, and I'm very pleased that for the last, is it 3 years or 2 years, Jane has become her former church, St Mary's, closed down, and she has joined St Michael's, and she has joined the guild. So we meet in the afternoon now. And yes, I enjoy that too.
So you're talking about the church and your involvement with the church, and you mentioned St Michael's, and that gives us a good link to talk about Burns. I'm going to pass over to Jim and get Jim to have a chat with you about your interest in Burns.
Right.
Betty, I asked the same question to everybody. How did you start with Burns?
Well, as I said before, my mother got friendly with this Nettie Henderson. She invited us to these 2 closing socials, then said about joining. And when I moved up to the Kingham in 1969, my sister and I joined the Dumfries Ladies in 1970. 1971, my sister was Moira. She went on the committee and I went on as junior vice president. Now, in them days, I didn't know everything that was involved, but Bessie Kirkland, who was secretary at the time, was very good at saying, you get a lot of help, blah, 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 and I took it on, and I have no regrets. Mrs. Shearer was the president in front of me. Now, she was this Mrs. Henderson's sister, but she was more involved in Burns, and you could say she was near enough a founder member, but she gave me a lot of good advice. The club had an ordinary membership or life membership. Now, she says, if you're going to enjoy the club, I would advise you to become a life member, which she did. And in 1972, I was proposed to go to the conference. I said, oh no, I can't go to the conference. I've got 3 young children, my husband's and she, but it's your duty, which was very on with, what you should do and what you shouldn't do. Oh, but I says, I'm sorry, I'll do my best to go in 1973. However, in them days at the conference, you could only go if you were a delegate or a member of the Burns Federation. So nearer the time of the conference, the person that was proposed to go instead of me took a heart attack. My mother was in a car accident, injured her legs, and she served in the Queen's Arms Bar in Dumfries, and she couldn't go to her work. So Nettie and her decided that my mother would come down and look after my children, and Betty would go to the conference. So Betty went to the conference in Aberdeen with Mrs. Hendon and Mrs. Shearer, two much older ladies, and borrowed clothes. I got my evening dress from my sister. I got my long white gloves for the civic reception from another person. I got a hat from another person. And you know, I had a great time. People told me they felt sorry for me, a young thing with two older people. I said, well, I thoroughly enjoyed myself. So Mrs. Shearer said to me, well, Betty, if you enjoy that, to make sure you get to the conference, you should become a member of the conference, the federation, I should say. So I became a member of the federation in 1972 and have been a member since, and thoroughly enjoyed and been to most of the conferences, and each one has a story. You don't need...
Well, that's certainly true. Right, but see, just to slow down a minute, right? You said earlier on when you were talking about being the secretary of Dumfries Ladies #1 Burns Club, 35 years.
Yes.
Right, now, the first time I came in contact with you, it was in that role that you had for those 35 years.
Yes.
How did you survive doing that in the modern era without no wish to be doing anything other than handwritten work?
Well, do you know, it surprises me because secretary always think I write letters, and I absolutely hate writing letters. So I did most of my booking folk by phone. I had to write letters, yes, but I did most of my, I became a dab hand at the phone, on the phone, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a wheen years since I met you, Jim.
Yes, it was 2007 or something, something like
right.
that. In fact, it was at conference, I think.
You came talking in and out of Tam O'Shanter.
I contacted you about that just no long after, because obviously the competition, which you know, if you can explain to the folk your involvement with that.
Well, they come in 1989. It was suggested that we have a week of Burns events to try and attract visitors to Dumfries. It was a Mr. Webb, and I forgot his first name. It could have been Michael. So each club had something to do. So we decided we would do the Tam O'Shanter on the Tuesday night. And the house did something. The Southern Counties, I think the first event they did was a Burns supper. And the Dumfries Burns Club did a talk at the museum. Their talk still goes on, and our Tam O'Shanter still goes on. And I was involved with it for 30 years. And it was great. Now, to begin with, I'm not going to say by whom, but to begin with, it was thought that we're making a mistake, that we wouldn't get, you know, the competitors. And luckily we did. We started off having it in the Skyline. Shirley Bell, who you probably remember, had the Skyline, her and her husband. And when the Skyline closed, we went to the Globe. And usually 6 competitors was the ideal number. Sometimes we had 5. But there was one year there was 2 didn't turn up in the night, so I decided I would take 7, because usually one didn't turn up, and it usually finished up, you know, that we had the 6. But if it so happened that they all came, we still managed the 7.
Yeah, it's a wonderful competition, and I'll say to anybody out there who's never been to it, just if you get the chance, go and sit and watch, because it's a wonderful thing. I genuinely adore it. It's great fun to be there, and you hear such absolutely terrific readers, you know, reciting Burns's favourite poem, really.
Well, some people have came and didn't get first place, and some people in the beginning were doing a lot of actions, like an entertainment, but it was always stressed that it's to be told as a tale for the competition. And some people, as I say, come and didn't win, and they come back again and won it.
That's right.
There was one competitor, you know, he won it, and he was coming back the next year, and he was just a young fella, and he died. And it runs in my head, his name could have been Jim Campbell. Can't remember, but he was really keen to win it, which he did. And he died before his time. It was sad.
Indeed, that's sad.
Some of the Newcomlet boys have won it as well. In fact, the first tune was a Newcomlet boy.
I remember Jim Brown winning it well, yes. But we always made it that the winner was a judge the next year, so they couldn't win it twice in a row. But there was a lassie, Fiona Jameson, she came back and won it much later too, but Jim was excellent.
Aye, I would agree with you there.
Aye, aye.
Aye.
I've seen him 1 or 2 times since, but no for a while.
Mhm.
No for a while.
I think Jim still is the best in my mind at Tam O'Shanter. We watched him once. We were in the Brig of Doon down in Alloway, and we were just standing on top of the bridge, and Jim put a scarf on out of his pocket and just started telling the tale, and he attracted a crowd of American tourists, and you could have heard the pin drop. It was phenomenal.
Yes. Oh, it was great. It was great. We've had lots of good folk. I'm going to mention this because I can't get over how excited it was. Professor Henry Mink. He was made an honorary president of the Burns Federation, and he came to a Tam O'Shanter competition because it was just after the conference, and it was handy. He was over in the country, lived in Santa Barbara, and asked him to present the prizes this year. And I couldn't get over how excited he was. He was from Poland, and he married a Scotch lassie from Dundee. Did you see him? Did you ever see him?
No.
So he's not with us now, but I couldn't go over, and he had a lot of Scotch sayings, the way he said them. Fair for spoken, I'm fair for spoken, and I'm fair for it did. I mean, a lot of folk were pleased, but his excitement knew no bounds at being asked to present the prizes in the famous Globe Inn.
Tremendous. I only came down to the competition once, and I have to confess, I came down to see how you did it, because we were running the break competition in Muirkirk, and we were looking for tips.
All right. Right.
We learned quite a lot from you, but that's a lot of years ago now.
Right.
You must have an awful lot of Burns memories.
Oh, I have. I'm going to tell you this one because I've said it before, but I can't go over the coincidence. And you know, there was a time, I suppose Jane will be the same, there was a time I felt that whatever place I went to, I could meet a Burns in there. Because we had been involved with the Federation meetings and all the meetings, whatever area you went to, you could find a Burns in. The conference in Calgary, 1993.
Uh-huh.
And the Calgary Pipe Band had been playing this night, and on this night the Dumfries contingent was sitting at the same table. So 1 or 2 of the Calgary Pipe Band came over to speak to us. One of them grew up the road for where I live now. I didn't know him. And then this older guy, it was his turn to speak to me, and I says, "Oh, where did you come from?" He says, "New Abbey."
Uh-huh.
Oh, I says, "My Uncle Gordon and Aunt Jess McGinley lived there." He says, "He was a mate of mine." I says, "What? There's more." I says, "What?" He says, "Yes." He says, "As a matter of fact, I had a hanging for his wife's sister." His wife's sister? I says, "That must have been my mother." And it was my mother. And of course I said, "What's your name then?" He says, "Bob Hunter." Well, Rose, a friend that was in my company for Dumfries, knows that my middle name's Hunter. So she actually said it, which at the time I was naughty, I didn't like. She says, "Meet your father." I says, "He's not my father." I says, "My granny's maiden name was Hunter." Well, it transpired he had fancied my mother. And he was very kind to us because when the conference was passed, we were going to be travelling about, hiring a van, and Lorna Johnson was going to be driving it, and he gave us information where to go. He took us to places that we wouldn't have known about. And this Murray Edgar, that grew up at Trehoton up the road from me, he invited us all to his house. And Bob Hunter and his wife came in. Well, I know she was coming up. When she came in, she was a spitting image of my mother.
Oh.
Couldn't believe it. Sally, my sister-in-law, was in the company, and her mouth just opened. So he must have fancied that type of woman. Anyway, somewhere along the line, I says, "What happened to you then?" Oh, he says that she told me I was a rogue. He says, and I must admit, I was a bit of a rogue in them days. So how going to Calgary and meeting somebody that had a hanging for my mother?
There you go.
Uncanny. But they were very nice. All the name folk in Calgary were very nice, yes.
He came to visit you, didn't he?
Oh, aye, 2-3 years later, 3 or 4, I can't remember. And I get the call from him. I never heard from him, so can't say we'd been in Canada. He says, oh, the Calgary Pipe Band is playing at the Edinburgh Tattoo. He says, I'm coming down to visit my sister. Is it all right if I can meet up? Yes, certainly. Give me your number and I'll sort something out. So I arranged for those of us that were in Canada to treat him and his sister to a meal at the Station Hotel. And then I arranged for him to come down and meet my husband and I at the house. But I also arranged for my Uncle Gordon to bring my Aunt Jess and my mother, but not tell her who was going to be there. And they come down to the house, and what a lovely night we had. And I've never heard from him since, but I mean, he'll be long gone. So what a story that is.
Amazing coincidences.
Can't you believe it? But he was a character. Like I would say, he took us to this place for a meal. He never asked us what we wanted. He just ordered steaks for everybody and hoped would like it. So being the organiser, I had said, what about the bill? I said, oh, he would do the door 2 or 3 minutes ago. But he had a quip for everything he said. He was a character. And a member of the Calgary Pipe Band. Yeah.
That's quite an experience.
I'm fascinated with something you said earlier on as well. Jimmy Shan at Burn Supper. What's the story with that?
That was in 1986 to celebrate the publication of the Burns poems. Joe Campbell, managing director of West Sound Radio, was going to have a one-off Burns supper in the hospitality in Glasgow. About 1,000 folk attended it. And he had big names of show business at the supper. And it became, I don't know if it's still going yet or not, but I had about 30 members from the Dumfries Lady go for over 10 years. We booked in overnight. And that was in 1986. Now, in 1996, he invited David Shanklin from Dumfries. And David Shanklin outshone all the big names he had, well, in my mind, and a lot of folk. He had Cliff Mitchellmore, Magnus Magnusson, Kenneth McKellar, Moira Anderson, and he had, what was that Scotch name? What's the Scotch singer again?
Andy Stewart.
Andy Stewart, addressing the haggis, and he had on his twin jacket. And Jim Connor, it must have been about the time Jim Connor was president from Canada, because he was in the audience and he addressed the haggis and he went like this with the knife, and the next minute blood's coming through his jacket. He went too far with the knife and cut in his sleeve, but Dr. Connor went to his aid. That was Andy Stewart there. So you have a lot of big names from the television world and politicians and things like that. And it wasn't us being biased about Davy Shanklin, but Davy Shanklin was a local speaker, much sought after, well liked, and Joe Campbell had him up in 1996 and he outshone them all. It was good.
Have you a favourite Burn Supper?
Favourite Burn Supper? Oh, jeez. Oh, my goodness. Oh, that's difficult. I don't know that I've got a favourite. I've enjoyed a lot. I'd have to take me too long to think about that. The big one in Joe Campbell's, there were 1,000 folk there, and the barns of beef were carried on great big wooden thingables and sliced in the hall. It was quite an event, but I don't know. I've enjoyed a lot of burn suppers. I've enjoyed a lot of speakers, a lot of good speakers. I mean, Wilson Ogilvie was a very popular speaker in this area for many years. Oh, thank you very much. My favourite burn supper. I couldn't even get my favourite Burns conference. I got out to enjoy them all. I do.
Well, I've certainly met you at many conferences, and you always seem to enjoy yourself.
I'm just imagining 30 ladies from Dumfries #1 Ladies Burns Club getting let loose in Glasgow after that burn supper.
In them days, every time we were at a conference, we always congregated in a room and there wasn't many for the Dumfries ladies in it, but there was a lot of burns either sang or recited in the room after the function. So we went home laughing asleep, but it was good. It was good. And I tell you, when we were at Kilmarnock in 1986, I had difficulty getting places for folk to stay, so I put the non-drinkers in a posh place, and those that like to drink in an after evening. We were in the Wheat Chief Inn in Kilmarnock, and no offence, Mrs. Shearer, but Mrs. Shearer, you know, who was quite whatever. They were in a nice place. We were in this place, and I said to the owner of the hotel, "Is it all right if we bring some folk back there to have a wee kind of party?" He says, "Yes," and he moved the jukebox and let us help ourselves the drink and put the money in. How good was that?
You wouldn't get that nowadays.
And the Wheat,
in Kilmarnock.
that was a Wheat Chief Inn, and yes.
Well, the Wheat Chief's still on the go. It's
Oh,
it's
no.
now, it's now a Spoons. It's now a Weatherspoons place. The Wheat Chief now.
Oh, I'm nowhere. But I'll tell you another instance. We were at a oh no, this wasn't a conference. Jane in Avrocare, who was a very much in demand recitation is doing here, were the first ladies to visit the Alamo Burns Club. Right? Like, and we're put up in a hotel in Paisley, and Jane being Jane hadn't eaten for a while. So when we got to the hotel, Jane and I were sharing, and we got to the hotel, Jane was hungry, so she ordered sandwiches to be brought up to her room. And of course, a wee while later, they knocked the door. Well, she was in a state of undress, getting ready for the night. So she says, "You answer the door, Betty." So she hid behind the door, right? And I went and got the sandwich. And when I turned around with the sandwiches, right across was a window with mirrored shutter. So the waiter that delivered the sandwiches, they were away with a smile on his face.
Oh, dear, oh dear.
Well, I never seen mirrored shutters before.
Feeling that,
In
obviously.
fact, I don't think I've seen them since. Mirrored shutters. I thought she was hiding, so there you go. That it made that way at night.
Oh no! I think I need to change the subject here.
I think we probably should make sure our audience realises that Jane's sitting beside you there.
Aye, oh, I would recall it. I tell you what, we were at Paisley once, and we got a guided tour of Paisley, and we're taken to Jane and me. It was a conference in Paisley, and we got a guided tour, which was very interesting. And we're taken to the Paisley Burns Club's meeting place, which is where Tannahill, Robert Tannahill was born. That was super. We were pleased about that. We didn't expect to get that. Then at the conference, I'm going on about conferences. The conference in Hamilton, Ontario, one of our lady members had been widowed, and she was wondering that she wanted to go to the conference, but she was wondering if she could afford it. However, she went and got herself a kilt, a charity shop, and what have you. Well, it changed her life forever. She met a man from the Corgi Burns Club at Hamilton, and the following year went to live in Corby.
Oh, there you go.
So she pondered about going, all because of her financial state, and it changed her life forever. And she had a very happy life in Corby. She died last year, and her husband died the year. He belonged Fort William, and was down like a lot of Scots folk were in Corby.
The things that happen at these conferences.
I've been trying ever since.
So when you have these wee nights after a conference and everybody does a turn, what do you do, Betty?
Pardon?
When everybody does a turn, what do you do?
Oh, I'm a listener. I'm a listener. I don't recite, and I can't sing. Listen, I used to recite poetry at the school, went to learn lots of poetry at school, but no, I don't. I have enough to do organising things and sorting that out. I just listen at the conferences. But it's amazing at the conferences, the number of folk that does recite and sing. And they don't have them now. The conference, no, we'll go to bed after when the function's finished. But for years and years and years, a lot of folk.
I think this year, there's been a few years now. That's not happened, but I think this year it will certainly happen. It's back in Kilmarnock, and Jane's going on, and I think it'll be a really good conference this year, Betty.
Well, before I joined the Burns Federation, this Nettie Henderson, it was friendly with mum. She couldn't come to one of my children's christenings because she had a conference. And I thought, sorry, a bleeding conference before my wedding christening. I thought a conference was a meeting. And that was it. I didn't know conference consisted of a. And in them days, when I went to Aberdeen, it was a very cheap weekend. A very cheap weekend. And it was good. I enjoyed it. Oh, and I met some of Burns' connections. Etta Burness from the Fiji. And their grandson later, Gilbert Talbot Burns. And that year in Aberdeen, that was 1972, we went to Glenbervie for an unveiling of the monument. And the Burness fellow went to a lot of things. Lawrence Burness, he went to a lot of Burns things. He was connected to them. And there was somebody from Isabel Begg's family, was at Aberdeen, William Begg. Not the direct line from Burns, but of his sister, his brother's family. And then I saw Richard Gowring with the silverware, the snuffer and tray that Jean Armour presented to. We saw that. And one of my possessions that I've got, Jean Armour Burns Brown was a member of the Dumfries Ladies Burns Club. When I joined the Dumfries Ladies Burns Club, there were 3 founder members, Mrs. Henderson, Mrs. Shearer and Mrs. Wilson. And Mrs. Wilson, after she died, her daughter, Mrs. Grierson, who worked for Dinwiddie's the printers, came with some mementos that her mother said to get. And one of them was the Dumfries Ladies Burns Club dinner programme with Jean Armour Burns Brown's signature in it.
Oh, wow.
So I'm very pleased to have that. And when she died, the president of the club at the time was a pallbearer at a funeral, and she's buried in St Mary's Church. So I'm very pleased to have that. Mrs. Shearer, who was a sister of Mrs. Henderson, was a member of the Dumfries Ladies for 72 years. I don't think I'll equal that. 72 years.
That's amazing.
That's a long time.
How long have you been a member, Betty?
72, 53 years.
Yep.
53 years.
And you got a mention at the Scottish Parliament because of that, did you not?
Did I? Oh, I'll tell you what else I could go on about it. And a big honour was in 1996. I was president of the SSCBA. Now, that was a fantastic year. We had a lantern procession in Dumfries. And as we started off at Burns Centre, and as folk were going over the suspension bridge, folk were going over at the Albrig at the same time. What a lovely thing it was. Oh, these
Sounds lovely.
And we went to the mid-steeple where an effigy of Robert Burns was lit. The following day, we were at St Giles Cathedral for a church service, and I couldn't believe it. The folk were talking there, they'd seen it on television the day before. After that year, then there was this gala evening at Shambly at New Abbey in a marquee, invitations by the Secretary of State for Scotland, the Right Honourable, can't mind his name, and he was there and his wife, and the Prime Minister at the time was John Major and his wife, and he was there, and all presidents and their husbands' wives and secretaries were invited to it. Everything was free and you were picked up at the door.
Wow.
Wonderful evening that was. Then there was a massive procession through the streets of Dumfries. About 2,000 folk in the procession and about 20,000 lying in the streets. I was on a high. I didn't need drink. And of course, a lot of Burns clubs from all over the world there, and Freemasons and whatever. And then we finished up at St Michael's Church, and Lord Clyde, who was a descendant of Robert Burns, was made president of the Dumfries Burns Club for that year, and he accepted all the wreaths at St Michael's Church. And then there was a function at night, special function at night. The conference was in Dumfries that year, with a street fair in the town of Dumfries. There was a bus tour, an open deck bus tour of Dumfries, and Wilson Ogilvie did the narration in the bus. And where I live is on the Burns Trail. So it'd come down my way. It was action-packed.
And did they've signage saying Betty Haining lives here?
No, I didn't put that up because I knew. But and then we had a Thanksgiving evening in the assembly rooms where I used to go dancing, which is now a Masonic place. It was at night in the end of the year, but it was absolutely great. 1996, and the Crichton Grounds was the main place, and what a wonderful place to have the main function. The grounds there, it was wonderful. I can't believe, that I was that was it. Plus all things, so I couldn't have been president in a better year.
No, and it sounds as though you were a big contributor to the organisation of it.
Well, Tommy Johns was the secretary, George Thompson was the treasurer, and I was the president. And because I was going to be president in 1996, I didn't become president in 1995, but in the early 90s, I still had to chair the meetings for that. Not the SACB meetings, but the ones to do in 1996, because I was going to be president then, and with quite a lot of them. Because whatever was included, the theatre, the police, the army, everybody could send a delegate to the meetings. It was great. It was great. A lot of work went on. Plus, we raised a lot of money with the result that we were able to set up the SSCBA Commemoration Fund, which is still on the go, and it's also there to help out the stipulation there to help out the schools competition. So
very good.
We're very, and the Dumfries ladies, not only in 1996 did we have all these things going on, but previous to that, all the clubs were busy raising money. So if our club had something on, we expected members from other clubs to support it. And equally, if they were arranging something, we were expected to support it. So I don't know where the 1990s went.
We certainly were one of the clubs that was in Dumfries on that big day. So and it was a tremendous day. The weather stayed nice, and
it was lovely.
Just lovely. Yeah.
The streets were packed with folk. It was great, and of course there was recordings. It was recorded, but it was on, what did you call them things? DVD. Whatever that was on then, which they don't use now. But yes, it was great. So I was very lucky. And after I come off as president, I became secretary of the SSCBA for a good number of years. And round about that time, the Friends of Ellisland was formed. And we secretaries and presidents were invited to meet in the Sheriff Courthouse with a view to forming the Friends of Ellisland. And of course, the secretary went along to that. And what happened? It finished up as treasurer. And thoroughly with superb years as Ellisland. Then more things went on there as some clubs. Plus, we had 3 ploughing matches. The last one was attended by Joanna Lumley.
The Dumfries ladies have been very busy over the years. But just in a personal question, because I think we'll be running out of time shortly, but one thing that I need to ask is, in terms of Robert Burns, do you have a favourite song or a favourite poem?
Oh, at school it was A Fond Kiss. Even as a child, it brought tears to my eyes. A Fond Kiss, because I just imagined somebody falling in love and parting. Even as a child, A Fond Kiss. Yes, A Fond Kiss was my favourite. And I like Parnassus Hill. But A Fond Kiss was my favourite and always has been. And a local man, Frank Curran, if he was singing and I was in the group, he'd always sing it. Frank Curran.
And that brought a tear to your eye, did it?
Yes, as a child it did.
It's a lovely song. Lovely, lovely song. And the thing we haven't mentioned, and your time as president of the area association, you must have been very much involved in the schools competition. I know you certainly were when I was there trying hard to judge some wains a few weeks ago, because you were a great help to me.
The first schools competition in 1985 was at Glenrothes, and there was a pupils from a school at Glinger went up to it. We didn't have them from all over, just the pupils from Glinger. And Davy Smith and Bessie Kirtland were waiting to get in the bus at Lockerbie, and they forgot about us. But they came back. Davy phoned and he came back, and that was the very first competition, and I've attended more or less every one since then, 1985. And I was for a long time I was in the literature committee in the Burns Federation, but somebody put me down for the schools, so I just did what they said and went to the schools for a bit. And I had I don't know whether it's the honour or pleasure of being in the finance committee of the Burns Federation for 3 years. But it was a different way. They had the finance committee in them days.
But you probably kept them right in terms of all these pound, shilling and pence columns that you had from when you were a teenager. I would imagine as a treasurer of anything, you'd be quite reliable in terms of what you're able to do, and your understanding of numbers would stand you in good stead.
I like to have more money in the bank this year than last year. Right?
I think that's quite a good philosophy. I can see why they had you on the finance committee.
Well, I didn't do a great lot in the Federation Finance Committee, but I mean, I was pleased to be on it.
So what else have you got to do in the Burns world? Is there anything that you've not done that you'd like to do?
No, really. I was twice asked, I don't want to sound bum here, but I was twice in the southern counties after 1996, my name put forward to go for Burns Federation President, which would have been an honour, but I felt, no, I was quite happy doing locally what I did, and not driving was a
disadvantage.
Yes, a disadvantage. A number of people said, oh, but we'll see. And Davy Smith says, oh, when he was travelling with a chain, he always liked to have somebody with them because it was valued it so much. But no, I thought about it and I've no regrets. I was quite happy with what I was involved with here.
Jim, we're probably in about the last 5 minutes. Is there anything that we've not asked Betty about yet?
No, really, I'm just fascinated listening to the stories.
Just got a bar of loads.
What else could I think? Yes, I've met a lot of great folk. There's folk in the Burns movement that I've met through being a Burnsian, and there's some of my friends that, because they've heard how much I've enjoyed it, have joined. In fact, I was visiting one the day that joined St Michael's. Oh, I was a founder member of St Michael's Burns Club. Shirley Bell was the instigator of it. She said to the minister about it, and the minister asked us along to a meeting at the Manse, how we felt about starting the Burns Club. We thought, great. And it formed in 2007. Yes, I've just come in mind of something else. And what was Betty? Is treasurer of St Michael's Burns Club. But they had a senior and a junior vice president, but the first two died. So I thought, I want to do away with that. I just want a vice president, because I was going to be next, you see. So I didn't want to be the third to die. And so we just had a vice president. Then 2011 to 2013, I was president. Now, my brother knows the Duke of Buccleuch on speaking terms. So I said to Alistair, would you do me a favour? Would you ask the Duke of Buccleuch if he'd come and speak at St Michael's Burns Club? Well, I couldn't believe it. I got a personal call for the Duke. I could hardly talk. And he says, well, your brother has said to me, but he says, I'd rather not. And just an instant, I would got kind of deflated. Then he says, but what I would like to do is invite you and your members and your brother and his wife to Drumlanrig Castle for morning coffee, tea, scones, and a personal tour of the castle by myself.
Oh, wow.
I was so excited. I couldn't wait for the next meeting to come along. And every member attended. And we went to Drumlanrig Castle, and we got I presented, and we had a book. I think it was the 2009 book. It was a big book that Peter Westwood did, Burns, present with that, and a badge. So I pinned it, and it fell to the floor. Well, I picked it up and I was shaking like anything. I didn't say it was nerves. I said it was excitement. And what a lovely morning we had. That was another special treat for me, and loads of photographs were taken at Drumlanrig Castle. And Murdo Morrison was there. Murdo and Hazel and Walter and Liz, I don't know if you know them, Walter and Liz, they were members of St Michael's. Walter and Liz wasn't there that day, but Murdo was there, and he penned a lovely verse on that event at Drumlandry Castle. So that's a nice memento to have from there, and loads of photographs were taken. So yes, and that's another lovely. I'm still treasurer of St Michael's, and at the moment Jane is president.
There you go.
So yes, so all the involvement, plus I'm involved with Thornhill Burns Club, which I don't know if you've heard of Thornhill. Is that a time?
No, that was just from a sound.
Am I talking too much?
No, you're doing fine. I was just thinking, you were asking if we heard of Thornhill. Yeah, we contact with Thornhill when we were running the Lepate competition, because they wanted to start doing the whistle competition, and they were looking for advice on what we did.
We did. Well, that was another thing we had during 1996. We'd won two soirees. We'd won at Kirkconnell House near New Abbey. We'd won at Drumlandry Castle. We'd won at Finlayson House, the early Glencairn's home. And we had one at Friar Scarce. One of the events at Friar Scarce, the whistle was actually there in the early days. And John Ingalls, I don't know, he was
John.
He was there and gave a talk on it. Yes, them soirees we had to dress in period costume.
Oh wow!
And yeah, lots and lots of good memories.
You could write a book.
Pardon?
You could write a book.
Oh, aye, and another one, as I talk about one, another one, another one comes to mind. So I've thoroughly enjoyed my Burns life, been involved with Burns, met a lot of nice folk, and been to a lot of places.
Fantastic. Well, I think you'd have made a great president of the federation. So I think it's their loss. But we've come to the end of our time. So I just want to say, Betty, thanks very much for telling us about your life with Robert Burns. Thank you.
Thank you
very much for